Hello, sports fans. It is Tuesday, November 50th, 2013, and as usual, a lot to get to in the sports world, so let's get it going right now. And we are ready for Week 11 of the college football season, and once again, we are joined by Mr. Joe Spano from Sirius Satellite Radio by way of the Sports Bylines, who, by the way, was 8-0 in his picks last week.
Wow, every once in a while you get what a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
You were perfect, 8-0.
You know what it was? To me, it seemed like one of those weeks where last week presented some obvious mismatches to me, and there were some obvious lines that I was able to catch. We were both in lockstep on the best unit on the field with Michigan State being that Michigan State defense, and they dominated Michigan in that matchup. We knew Miami, due to their injuries and some of the other things, were a paper tiger when you compared them to Florida State. So we really didn't have too much trouble finding some themes in that college football weekend, and we thought lines presented themselves quite well. Let's see if this week is as easy.
Now, this week we have 3 colossal games, but we'll save them for later. 2 of them are on Thursday night, believe it or not. We got a double header on Thursday night.
Does that mean we get Gus Johnson screaming twice this weekend, Thursday and Saturday?
We could very well. And I'm going to have to adjust. Are you going out to watch these games on Thursday, or are you going to have the 2 TVs set?
I'm going to be down in the studio. I'm going to be hunkered down, and I have to do an early workshop at the Connecticut Schools of Broadcasting, do a little teaching.
There we go.
Teach some people how to put together those demos, get out there and make a living in doing what we do.
Absolutely.
And then I will be DVRing. I will have to catch up on OU and Baylor, but I will be in front of the TV for opening kickoff of Oregon-Stanford. So I'll be both down in the studio, hunkered down, watching with a lot of focus, and up into the wee hours of the morning and losing some sleep the next day.
I think the Oregon-Stanford game is the best game of the weekend. I even put it ahead of Alabama or LSU, and I definitely put it ahead of Baylor, Oklahoma. I think Oregon-Stanford is the game this week.
Styles make fights.
Right.
And those two teams couldn't have more different styles, and that's what's so intriguing. We'll get to that in just a little bit, won't we, Mike?
Okay, so we will keep those 3 big games for a little later. Let's start with some other games in the top 10. Now, Clemson and Ohio State are off this week, so let's put them aside. They're off this week.
Excellent.
Pick number 1, number 9 Auburn, -7 at Tennessee. And we've been down this road before in Knoxville. Auburn, of course, 8-1, very hot since losing to LSU. They are playing really nice football. Tennessee is 4-5, lost to Alabama, got bombed by Missouri. But Tennessee has done some things at home. Should have beat Georgia, really should have won that game. And we know the quarterback is out also for Tennessee. We know he's out. That's what they're saying anyway. It looks like he's going to be out, so they're going to have their backup quarterback in. Of course, they beat South Carolina in Knoxville as well. So Tennessee, we've been down this road before with them at home, but I still like Auburn. I think Auburn is better than Tennessee. I don't like the Tennessee quarterback being out here. They don't have a good offense to begin with.
Right. They don't have a good they're not strong offensively to begin with.
Right.
They finally had found something at the quarterback position. Now you're going back to one of these other quarterbacks that they were looking at earlier this year, who certainly wasn't the answer and turned the ball over like crazy. The only problem for Auburn, Tennessee's tougher at home than they are on the road, and this is what teams that are growing are often like. They often struggle on the road and they're tougher at home. And Auburn could be without Nick Marshall. He got injured in that game last week, and everything I see is it might be a game-time decision, and Marshall might not be playing, and they might have to go with their backup quarterback as well. So that becomes a very intriguing matchup just from that standpoint. It becomes a battle of the backup quarterback.
Right, as we saw on Monday Night Football last night.
And when that happens, these games tend to kind of come close. You got Tennessee at home.
And they've been good at home. Even though they're 4-5, they've been competitive at home.
They got their one SEC win at home. Auburn may or may not be with Nick Marshall. Just because of that, I'm going to take Tennessee, and I'm going to take the points. I think this game is going to be a lot closer than people think, because Auburn is also going to be without their starting quarterback. If Marshall plays, all bets are off, and I like Auburn to roll. But if Marshall doesn't play, and he is out, they take the precautions of resting him for better competition because of the injury, he's not ready to go, I'll take Tennessee to cover the points at home.
I'm thinking he's going to play. That's why I took Auburn. But like you said,
I'm going to officially, you need me to make a pick?
Yeah.
My official pick is Tennessee to cover the number.
And it's funny, you've learned your lesson, because I've been down this road before with Tennessee. I mean, the same thing happened with South Carolina. They were favored by 7, South Carolina. At Tennessee, I took South Carolina. Tennessee won outright.
Right.
Georgia was favored by 7 at Tennessee. Tennessee should have won that game. I lost both of those games. Haven't learned my lesson yet. I'm going back on Auburn. Tennessee's got to prove to me they can do it again.
And Knoxville will be rocking. I think that's going to be, believe it or not, one of the more exciting contests of the weekend just because of all the factors that we've discussed.
It's a nice game. I wouldn't consider it a great game. But
it's not a great game, but it'll be a
nice,
hard-fought and competitive game because of the question marks at the quarterback position with the injuries that are there.
A nice SEC game.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, all right, so I'm taking Auburn. You are going to go the other way and take Tennessee in Knoxville. There we go. All right, that is pick number 1. Pick number 2, number 8 Missouri, -14 at Kentucky. Missouri, of course, bounced back last week after the loss, bounced back nicely and won last week. Kentucky is an awful football team. They're 2-6. I mean, why is this spread only 14 points?
I don't know.
I mean, to me, it should be 28.
There's a smart that knows something somewhere, but this game could be in Lexington, in Mars,
right,
in Jupiter, in Uranus, you name it. Doesn't matter where this game is being played.
Right.
Missouri is a much better football team with a lot more talent than Kentucky. And this is going to be one of those college football games that is over at halftime. Kentucky is the true bottom feeder in the SEC. Missouri is one of the top teams in the SEC right now. And the difference in talent will show. It'll show early. Even on the road, Missouri storms them and bombs them by halftime.
And Missouri bounced back nicely, I thought, last week. After the heartbreaking loss 2 weeks ago.
They dominated Tennessee very impressively.
You like to see that. You thought, how are they going to react? Were they going to be flat? They came out and they just busted Tennessee.
Defense took care of business. The offense wasn't bad. It wasn't great last week.
Good enough.
It was good enough. Again, with the difference in personnel, even with this one being in Lexington, the defense for Missouri will carry the, will carry the show. The offense will be a complementary piece. And Missouri will score 35 or 40 and only give up 3 or 7.
Yeah, I'm actually shocked it's only 14 points. The good news for UK, they are ranked number 1 in preseason basketball, right?
Yes.
College basketball.
Unfortunately, this isn't a basketball game. It's a football game. So Kentucky's going to lose.
Right. So we are in agreement. Missouri rolls.
Missouri rolls. I mean, if you're looking for a game this weekend to bet on with that small number, I would take Missouri in a major.
Yeah, I had to take a retake of that.
It's a best bet kind of game.
I thought this spread should be 28 or something, even in Kentucky. I mean, come on.
Those lines,
all right, so we're in agreement there.
Absolutely.
Pick number 3, number 2, Florida State, and we knew this was going to happen. We knew they were bouncing back up to number 2.
How long they stay there remains to be seen because Oregon, as we've talked about for the last couple of weeks, has a lot of their schedule still in front of them.
Yeah.
Florida State is done with the hard part of their schedule. The only potentially ranked opponent left is whoever it is that comes out of that the opposite division and is their opponent in the ACC
and
championship
that's getting worse and worse now.
So it might not even be a ranked opponent. So Florida State's number 2 right now. If Oregon runs the table, they will leap Florida State again.
Florida State's stay at number 2 is short. As a matter of fact, if Oregon beats Stanford this week, they will immediately go ahead and stay there the rest of the year.
Exactly.
And Florida State in that ACC championship game that you mentioned, they're going to get hurt because Virginia Tech now lost to Boston College.
2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
You lose to Duke and you lose to Boston College, you're not going to be ranked, but you're also not going to be in the ACC championship.
Miami is there. I mean, they got.
Is it going to be a rematch with Miami? Is it going to be Georgia Tech?
I'll tell you who else it could be.
Duke.
It could be Duke. Imagine if
that would
Duke makes the ACC championship.
That would kill. Because Duke is not even top 40 or top 50.
They could make
They're a nice story, but if you talk about a blow to any chance that Florida would have to leapfrog Oregon, that's it right there.
And I looked at Duke's schedule. They got a chance to run the table in their
What do they have? The Wake Forest and the
NC State, Wake Forest, and like North Carolina. They can win those games. Where
winnable game.
Georgia Tech has to go to Clemson.
They're not winning that one.
Miami's all beat up. They can lose to anyone.
Absolutely. There's no question about that. That's where you're really right.
Right.
They're so beat up right now.
And they got Vatech this week, Miami.
They could turn around and lose that game.
Absolutely. They
could end up being a 3-loss team, Miami, and they're out of the picture. Vatech's out of the picture. And who comes quietly sneaking along is Duke.
Duke, I'm telling you. So, I mean, Florida State is getting really hurt here. Plus, they get hurt, the Florida Gators. I mean, the Florida Gators, they're not getting anything. That would be, you expect Florida to be at least in top 15.
Florida can't, you talk about a team that's banged up. You think Miami's banged up? Florida's even more banged up. And you talk about a team that can't get out of its own way.
No.
What did they had one thing that they could lean on, and that was their defense.
Yeah.
And that's now so beat up that they can't even lean on that. And Fred Taylor's son, who is the one dynamic playmaker, and everybody can say anything they want about Trey Burton. He's a dynamic weapon, but he doesn't really produce.
No, not at all.
You know, it's really the most talented guy on that offense by a wide margin is Fred Taylor's son, the freshman.
Oh,
he's the one explosive player that they really have on offense. All apologies to Trey Burton because he's a change of pace option. He's not a 30 touches a game sort of option where Fred Taylor's son might be. But that alone, with a defense that's been compromised to the point that it's not what it was earlier in the year, is not enough for Florida to compete.
No, and I was actually shocked Florida made a comeback against Georgia last week. They were down big in that game. Actually got
it was 17-0. I blinked. It was 17-0.
Very
Again,
good.
you know, as we talked about off the air, there were moments where I kind of turned away. It wasn't a great week.
And I love the cocktail party. And even I had a tough time getting into it.
It was 17-0 in a blink of an eye. Next thing you know, I'm like, whoa, what happened here?
Yeah, exactly.
And it happened that fast.
And then Georgia, at the end of the game, went on like a 9-minute drive, and that tells you the story about Florida's defense.
And that's not the Florida defense from earlier in the year.
No, absolutely not. So Florida State's not going to get any credit for beating any of these teams on their schedule the rest of the way.
It's going to be a little too little, a little too late. But again, how many times have we talked about it? It's a system that's completely arbitrary. What's the difference between my 12-0 and your 12-0? Or in this case, 13-0. What's the difference between your 13-0 and my 13-0? And when you're trying to compare Oregon and Florida State, it really is arbitrary because these have been two of the most dominant teams in America, and they've dominated all the quality opposition on their schedule up until this point.
No, absolutely.
So we're really splitting hairs, and that's what makes the system so flawed.
The good news for Florida State is Oregon's got a tough schedule. You could see them maybe lose the game.
They could lose.
Right, so that's the good news. If you're looking for a
and
silver
there's no
lining,
way that Ohio State's passing them. All apologies to Baylor if they would have run the table.
No.
And their schedule's all in front of them, but they're not passing Florida
and no
State.
Big 12 title game, so
right.
No, and forget Fresno, Northern Illinois, and forget a one-loss Stanford.
See, those two should play each other.
Right.
It would be a nice story if they played each other for a BCS bowl bid. It doesn't happen that way, but it would be a nice story and a fun game to watch.
Okay, back to Florida State here. Florida State is minus 34 this week at Wake Forest. Now, Florida State has just been tattooing everyone. Bomb Clemson, bomb Miami. I mean, they're winning by like 100 points every week. Wake Forest last week got shut out at Syracuse. That's not easy to do. Let me say it again. They were shut out at Syracuse.
Are you saying you couldn't do that if you tried?
Right. They were shut out at Syracuse 13-0. That's hard to believe, actually. Wake Forest is 4-5. I don't want to hear about letdowns or looking past the team or whoever. Florida State will win this game 63-7. They are that good. I am a believer in them. Ever since that Boston College game where they struggled, they have been on absolute fire.
That was their only struggle all year. Otherwise, they've dominated even the elite of elite competition, top 10 competition that's come up on their schedule. They've dominated everybody outside of BC in BC. As much as I'd like to pick Wake Forest here, because there's been a couple of times, despite getting shut out by Syracuse, where they've crept up and they've either won games you didn't expect them to win.
Miami, they almost won.
Or they've played people hard like Miami. I just don't think Florida State takes its foot off the accelerator. And you know why? In addition to continuing to win, they're now trying to score style points. They're trying to figure out how to stay at number 2.
Right.
Or if they fall back to number 3, how to get back to being number 2. So for them, every game is foot on the accelerator for 4 quarters. They're going to do their best to win every game 63-7. It may just happen here at Wake Forest.
No,
I'll agree with you. You're not going to get me to disagree with you on this one.
I was listening to the Florida State defensive coordinator, and he said after the Boston College game, he reevaluated how he was coaching. He said he was coaching the guys the wrong way. They changed a few things, and sure enough, since then it's clicked because they are stampeding over everyone since that game. So he changed his whole approach after the Boston College game, tweaking things here and there, And it is sure work because they look like, to me, one of the best teams, if not the best
Well, you look at the team speed all over the field. Offensively, I think it's a given. Jameis Winston is a wonderful special quarterback who's going to play on Sunday.
How do you like him squinting without the context? Yeah. Squinting at the
scary a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
But nonetheless, he's a guy who's going to play on Sundays. There's skill position players all over that field on the offensive side of the ball for Florida State that are going to play on Sundays. And defensively, it's as fast a defense as you're going to see anywhere in college football.
I really like their team. I want to see them play Alabama. And I don't dislike Oregon. I like
But
Oregon.
you think we've been down that road before?
We have. I've seen it. I want to see... Because I think Florida State is the second best team in the nation.
All right.
And I would like to see them play Alabama.
In this arbitrary system where we'll never find out.
Because I think they could upset Alabama. I certainly think if they end up playing Ohio State, they would beat them. I certainly think that.
Ohio State's, and they're starting to hit their stride. They're starting to dominate some of these teams as the season's gone on in that down Big Ten.
Purdue.
But I really think the team last year was better than this year's team.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
just my opinion.
So I am rooting for Florida State to somehow get to this championship game. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I want to see Florida State, Alabama personally.
It could happen. They need a little bit of help, but not a lot.
And next year it would definitely have happened. I mean, next year we get the Final Four.
Next year you'd have a Final Four. It would be terrific. As it stands now,
how good
it
would
would be, Alabama playing Ohio State and Florida State playing Oregon.
And then
what would be better than that? We're leaving out Baylor already. But I have a feeling Baylor will sort itself out before it's all said and done, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes.
All right, so we are in agreement. Florida State just rolls over Wake Forest.
Out of the first three, we only have discord in one game. I think Tennessee's going to find a way to cover.
I will say this about Wake Forest. I think they get into the end zone this week once.
Okay, that's
as opposed to being shut out in the Carrier Dome.
Certainly not a game I'll be watching very closely.
No, absolutely not. Okay, pick number 4, and here is one of the gargantuan games of the week.
We're in Thursday night, and I love this.
Thursday
night, double header, so to speak. Even though they're on against each other, the starts are staggered enough that the back end of Oregon-Stanford will be on alone.
Here's the first game. Now, this is a 7:30 Eastern Standard Time game on Fox Sports 1.
Fox Sports 1.
Right.
And check your local listings
for
availability.
Number 10, Oklahoma, at number 6, Baylor. Oklahoma 7-1. They lost to Texas, of all teams. Baylor 7-0, just running past everyone. Baylor is favored by 14 points here. Pretty big number for this game. Pretty big number. I think you could be headed on the Oklahoma wagon here. I think you could be headed down that road. Before you throw out your pick, let me say this. I haven't gotten over that Oklahoma lost to Texas. And not only did they lose...
You're still mad at them about that.
I am. And they lost to Texas by 16 points. Let's keep that in mind.
I'm keeping it in mind.
Being the spread here is 14. They lost to Texas by 16 on a neutral field. This is one of the biggest games in Baylor football history. I'm telling you, they have been waiting for this. One of, if not the biggest. I mean,
Baylor football history is not exactly storied. No offense to Baylor football. This is the biggest game.
They had a few big games with RG3 there, but you're right. You could make the claim this could be the biggest game in Baylor football history.
This late in the year, they're undefeated with a say in the national title chase.
I'm right with you. So they have been waiting for this moment in Waco for a long, long time, and they have been waiting to just bomb Oklahoma for a long, long time. They've taken some beatings at the hands of Oklahoma over the years. I love this Baylor offense. I know they haven't been tested this year.
Haven't played anybody.
Haven't played anyone, but I still go back to the fact that Oklahoma lost to Texas. And a lot of their games I'm not impressed with either. They beat Notre Dame, but Notre Dame handed them that game. 1,000 turnovers.
Like you said. That game, when we talked about that game at the time it happened, that game, Notre Dame had turned the ball over twice before you blinked your eyes.
Right. Oklahoma didn't play well against TCU, and we see how bad they are. They
were awful against West Virginia in the opener before they switched to Bell at the quarterback position.
Even Oklahoma's win against Texas Tech, and we see Texas Tech is falling apart. Oklahoma State just drugged them. Oklahoma had a huge lead in that game and blew the game at one point, but then rallied to win at the end, and that was in Norman. And they gave up 30 points to Texas Tech. Baylor is a lot better than Texas Tech. Baylor can throw 21 points on you very quickly.
They could be the second most explosive team in America as far as putting up points in bunches right behind Oregon.
I have not been impressed with Oklahoma for a while now.
Okay.
Like you said, Stoops, the bloom is off the rose with him a little bit.
We've talked about that a lot, and that hasn't changed for me.
Yeah, the bloom is off the rose, and I loved when he first got there.
You kind of have a feeling what direction I'm going, but my feelings on Bob Stoops haven't changed.
Right.
The Texas loss is inexcusable. They could have, barring that loss, OU would possibly have a say in the national title picture. They've taken themselves out of it with a bad loss against Texas and Red River.
This number is big. It's 14. I'm still going to go with Baylor because I think Baylor is going to smell blood in the water.
Okay.
Once they get that offense rolling, I think the crowd is going to be in absolute frenzy on this Thursday night. I mean, I think Baylor's going to get rolling, and the train is just going to keep going. And I think they're going to put up a ton of points in this game. And Oklahoma may hang with them for a while. Baylor at home is going to be too much for them. They're going to run away with it, and they are going to cover this big number. I have a feeling you're going the other way.
I am going the other way.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a hell of a football game between two pretty darn good teams. One thing I know about Baylor, Art Briles can coach some football. This guy is a fearless coach, an innovative offensive mind. Baylor has dominated every opponent that's been put in front of it this year. They haven't played anybody on the level of Oklahoma.
Kansas State, maybe.
It's been Kansas State. It's been Louisiana Monroe. It's been, teams of that. They have not played anybody in the top 50.
No.
Much less the top 25.
Absolutely.
They haven't played anybody in the top 50. But they've dominated everybody that's come in front of them. Oklahoma's in another class. Is this a vintage Oklahoma team? Not really. But it was one that was highly ranked in the preseason, one that many people thought would have a say in the national title picture, in part because the Big 12 was a little down this year. These are the kind of games that OU, as king of the conference, along with Texas, have to go out and win if they want to slap down these upstart programs. And that's kind of what these big programs do against the upstart programs within major conferences. They kind of swat them away when the opportunity presents. Much like Texas Tech and the way OU swatted them down a couple of weeks back.
Right.
I don't know that OU could win this game outright, but I do know that this is going to be a tight game all the way through, and I'm very comfortable with them covering that number.
I had a feeling you were going with Oklahoma, but you're not ready to say actual upset here.
No.
You think if you had a pick, you'd say Baylor would win, but not by 14.
Exactly.
And how good of an atmosphere is it going to be in Waco?
It's going to be a great atmosphere. This is going to be a hell of a game to watch on Thursday night. And, you talk about a bet. You know how I'm a big fan of those two-team teas bets?
Right. This is
we've been talking about numbers that I think are out of line. We were talking earlier in the first set of matchups. There was a number we thought was way out of line.
Missouri, 14.
Missouri only at 14. I would do a two-team 7-point tease. I'd tease Missouri down to a 7-point favorite. I would tease OU all the way up to a 21-point underdog, and I'd make that bet, and I think I could make a boatload of money that way.
So that's where you're headed. You're headed to the cashier's window with your two-team tease this week.
That's it.
There we go. Okay, so we are in disagreement there. You are taking OU.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
And I'll tell you.
Who was Sooner, baby?
And I'll tell you, once Baylor wins this game, which I think they will, it's time we hammer Stoops in Oklahoma.
Because next week we'll do it. I promise you. I mean, I'll bring the ball peen hammer and I'll crack him over the head.
We've given him a break the last few years. When he first got there,
can I tell you the truth? We haven't given him a break since we started this,
right?
Because we have both talked in great detail about how frustrated we are with Bob Stoops and the fact that every year they lose that game.
Yeah.
We think he should be getting the same kind of heat and pressure that Mark Richt feels at Georgia, and we can't understand why he doesn't.
Right, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on this game very closely. The first game of the doubleheader should be spectacular. All right, that's game number 1 on Thursday. Game number 2 on Thursday. Now, this is a 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. This is an ESPN game.
ESPN.
To me,
screaming.
This is the game of the weekend. Number 3 Oregon at 8-0. At number 5, Stanford, who is 7-1. Stanford inexplicably lost at Utah.
We've talked about how tough they are at home. I have been burned by them a couple of times in their building, betting against them. On the road, they're a different team. But at home, they're tough.
Right. Oregon is a 10-point favorite on the road here.
That's a small number for them.
Well,
usually they've been favored much more.
Right. Now, as I said, Stanford lost to Utah. They hung on at home against Washington. That was a very good game. It beat UCLA 24-10. I mean,
stymied UCLA. Right. Really changed their whole season, hasn't it?
Won a dogfight against Oregon State. Did you watch that game, by the way?
I did. Yeah, I did.
It's kind of a dogfight for a while, like a low-scoring defensive game.
Wasn't the kind of football they loved that either of those teams love to play.
No.
But Oregon found a way to win. Usually it's beauty contests. That one was a little uglier than they like it, but they won anyway.
Now, Oregon beat UCLA 42-14. It was tied at the half.
I'm sorry, Stanford.
I knew what you meant. Oregon beat UCLA 42-14. It was tied at the half. They ran away in the second half. And they bombed Washington 45-24 at Washington. So if you look at the common opponents, Oregon beat UCLA 42-14, and Stanford beat UCLA 24-10.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
different kind of football.
Right.
Oregon goes and bombs them.
Right.
Stanford just kind of grades road over them.
And Stanford hung on against Washington, and Oregon bombed Washington at Washington. I am going to take...
That Oregon-Washington game was a game for a half.
It was.
The final number makes that deceiving. That was one hell of a football game for 30 minutes. Oregon came and stormed the castle in the second half, so keep that in mind.
That's what Oregon does. They can blow up a close game in a hurry, and that's why I am always afraid to pick against them.
You have not picked against them, and you say it every time we do this.
Right.
I can't pick against them.
And they keep winning and covering.
Right. Usually you say, especially in Eugene.
Right.
When they go on the road, sometimes you're a little more reticent to pick them.
Absolutely, but they can put up 28 points in like 7 minutes and not blink an eye. I am always worried about that, and I think it's going to be the same story here. I think this Oregon team is better than last year's Oregon team, and I don't think this Stanford team is as good as last year's team. So I don't think we're going to have an upset this year. I think Oregon, this game will be close, but like they always do, they get that one little spurt, and they run by you, and they don't look back. The Oregon running back, by the way, said they expect to put up 42 points in this game.
I mean,
yeah, so he's very confident.
I've learned not to doubt them.
Right, so
I do pick against them more than a lot of people.
Right.
But I've learned not to doubt them, and I'm never surprised when they end up stepping up and covering these big numbers when I think it's going to be closer.
I think this pace will be Oregon's. I don't think this will be a low-scoring 17-16 game.
Forget about it. Then you already know the answer if that's the case.
Right. I think this is going to be more Oregon's type game as opposed to last year's. It was more a Stanford's type game last year. It was 17-16, I think.
Well, they've shown you that they can slow it down and play four corners offense, and that beats Oregon.
I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. That favors Oregon all the way. I am picking Oregon here 42-31 to win by 11 points and just cover that 10 points. I have nothing but respect for Stanford in the program. The fact that Stanford is a number 5 ranked team is amazing to me.
They're ahead of Baylor, who hasn't lost a game, but Baylor has played it.
And this is after Luck went to the NFL. You thought, Stanford's, that's it. They had their little run with Luck. They're not going to be in the top.
No Harbaugh, no Luck.
I mean, come on.
No chance.
Right. And
not so much.
Here they are ranked
Coach Shaw's a terrific coach as well.
Absolutely.
And he keeps recruiting. And Kevin Hogan has really stepped up at the quarterback position.
No, absolutely.
And he's become a real good college quarterback.
No, he has. I am going to take Oregon. I think this is a high-scoring game. I do not think they are going to get beat this year by Stanford. I like Oregon 42-31 up on the farm in Stanford. Should be a tremendous game, though.
I'm going to use your logic. You've talked a lot about the fact that Florida State is the second-best team in the country and Oregon is the third-best team in the country.
That's what I would say, yes.
You've talked about the fact that Oregon does not like it when it slows down and gets physical.
No, they do
And
not.
you think a team like Alabama would run all over, would run right over them like a tank going over terrain, or a bulldozer going through terrain.
There's no way they put up 50 against Alabama. Just put it that way.
And if they don't, they probably lose.
Right.
So I'm going to take your argument there, and I'm going to use a little basketball analogy in here as well. It's always easier to slow down a basketball game or a game than it is to speed it up.
True.
This is a football game, so it's kind of the same thing.
True.
It is always easier to slow down a game than it is to speed it up. Stanford can flat out pound the rock. their physical offensive line will take the air out of the football, and they'll go on these 14-play, 76-yard drives. If they result in touchdowns, they can outright win this football game. I'm going to take this as one of those styles make fights sort of games. Stanford takes the air out of the football. They play a little four corners offense, or, on a football field. They make it their tempo, which Oregon is not great at.
No.
They can find ways to win those games against teams of lesser skill with that tempo. Stanford's the best team in America at that pure slow-down tempo. They will slow it down. Kevin Hogan, the quarterback, will make just enough big plays in this one. And I think Stanford wins outright.
Wow.
24-21, because you can't really slow it down all the way.
Wow.
It is Oregon.
So you think Stanford is going to hold Oregon to 21 points. Now, let me say this, and you've been on this in the past. Oregon's defense is a little better this year.
It is.
It's a little better. And
it's not bigger. It's better.
Better, right.
But it's not bigger, and that's where the problem lies. Stanford's offensive line is huge and physical. They come at you with a wave of running backs, and they're going to pound and pound and pound, and Coach Shaw is patient. If the running game doesn't pay instant dividends, he doesn't quit at it. He'll keep coming with it.
And here's the thing I don't like about Stanford this year. They lost to Utah. They didn't score a ton of points against Oregon State. Their offense isn't great. And I'll tell you, I remember that Washington game. Washington was on its way to coming back in that game.
I know.
And Washington was starting to move the ball at will towards the end of that game. That's stuck in my mind.
I'm playing with house money. I was 8-0 last week.
Right, exactly.
I'm going to take a shot here. I think it's Stanford's tempo, and I think that's the difference. This is a chance for Oregon to prove to me otherwise. If this game is kind of Stanford's tempo, and they still win, and that defense shows the toughness that it looks like they're showing because they are getting better and better on defense, then I think we all have to be believers in how good they really are.
Now, if Stanford happens to pull the upset here, do you think they should go ahead of Ohio State? They would have beaten number 3 Oregon. They have a loss. Ohio State hasn't played anyone.
You know how I feel about the Big Ten and how I feel about the level of competition that Ohio State has played in comparison to Stanford.
They lost to Utah, though. Utah's only 4-4.
Right. I am not going to put a one-loss Stanford ahead of Ohio State. I think everybody moves up a spot. Oregon would drop a couple of spots because they wouldn't drop far.
Right.
They would, they would drop, if Baylor won, they would drop directly behind an undefeated Baylor.
Absolutely.
But probably no further than that.
Okay, all right, so we disagree on this game. You're going outright Stanford with
outright.
The huge upset.
Outright.
It'll be like 1 o'clock in the East Coast on Thursday night, 1 a.m.
So somebody will be up doing football Friday on the Spano and Black Attack, very tired.
Right.
But will be crowing because of the pick.
And you think they will be celebrating on the farm as they are going to do
that big tree is going to run around.
And they are going to do it again to Oregon 2 years in a row. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we are in major disagreement on that one.
That's it. That's what makes it so much fun.
All right. Pick number 6, always a game we love.
The game of the century.
No, this is on Saturday. We've moved to Saturday now.
And you talk about this. You mentioned this last week. They moved it to prime time, 8 Eastern time, CBS, baby.
I checked. They definitely moved it. By the way, on Channel 7 at the same time as Notre Dame Pittsburgh. So you have a little conflict there.
I'll be watching. That's what they make multiple TVs for. And you can watch more than one football game at a time. The one sport you can't watch more than one of at a time is a basketball game.
No, absolutely. All right. Number 13, LSU, who is 7-2, a couple of losses, at number 1, Alabama, who's 8-0. Alabama comes in as an 11-point favorite in this game. LSU, of course, lost to Georgia and Ole Miss. This is not a vintage LSU defense. Not at all.
It's getting better, but it's
better,
still not
but
a vintage.
they're still giving up too many points for my liking.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And Alabama is getting better and better as the weeks go on. In the beginning of the year, maybe a little shaky, that Texas A&M game, a little shaky, but they are starting to really pour it on now. I like Alabama here at home. I don't think this is a vintage LSU team. I don't think they have the defensive horses to win in Alabama. That's asking an awful lot to go into Alabama, and now they're going to try and outscore them. I mean, come on. You have to have a better defense to go into Alabama and win. That's why I am taking the Tide here to continue their winning streak and to remain number 1. I think they beat LSU. by 14 points in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night. I love this game, though. I love the two fan bases. I love Bryant-Denny Stadium. I love everything about this game. I wish LSU didn't have 2 losses. It would be better if they were undefeated.
Well, then it would be the game of the century.
Right.
If you notice, every time they met, it's the game of the century.
Yeah, the last 3 years.
Right. It's not the game of the century this year, but it's still a hell of a football game.
Right.
And it seems clear. Your thought process to me is spot on. This is not one where you're going to get much disagreement out of me. Alabama's best team in the country. They're in Tuscaloosa. LSU has a good quarterback in Mettenberg.
He's very good, yeah.
He's become a very good quarterback, something they haven't had at LSU in a long time.
But their defense,
right.
I know it's
A.J.
getting better.
McCarron is a better quarterback.
Right. And at LSU
Vanderblue's a nice running back. T.J. Eldon and company are a better group of running backs.
Exactly.
LSU's got a real big offensive line. Alabama's is bigger and better.
Right.
On defense, it's an improving LSU defense.
But not great.
But far from vintage. And it looks a lot like some of these other SEC defenses that haven't come up big in spots. Alabama's defense, and you went through the numbers last week. This is why you got to watch every week, not some weeks.
Right.
Alabama's numbers. They're not giving up points. They're not giving up yardage.
Oh.
That defense is back to being a vintage Alabama defense.
They shut out Mississippi, who could put up some points.
So 2 units to 1 unit at home. LSU's all about offense. Alabama actually has the better offense, too. This is a game where Alabama is the better football team. LSU and the Mad Hatter, Les Miles, will hang around for a while.
Right.
But ultimately, a lot like you say. As this thing goes from third quarter into fourth quarter, Alabama will separate itself, and they'll win by something around 14 to 21 points.
No, I agree.
I like Alabama pretty comfortably.
I agree totally. So out of the 3 big games this week, you would say Oregon-Stanford is probably the best of the 3?
I tell you the truth. I think those 2 on Thursday night are both going to be terrific.
So you think
I really believe Baylor OU is going to be a terrific football game. It's going to be a chance for Art Briles and company to prove who they are.
By the way, there's a great article on him. I don't know if you read it. It's on
I did.
ESPN. Great article on him.
Well, I've talked about him a lot since we started doing this, and all of a sudden with them playing OU, the rest of the country caught on. Art Briles is a great coach at Baylor. He was terrific at Houston. And he put the Houston Cougars back on the map.
Yeah.
And he's a terrific football coach. He's gutsy. He's creative. I think both of those games are going to be terrific. And there's a chance that I think there's a good chance that Baylor wins that game. I also think there's a good chance OU wins that game. I think both of those 2 games on Thursday night are terrific.
Do you prefer the 2 games on Thursday the way they have it, or would you have liked to see, say, a 3:30 Saturday game, one of these 2 games on Thursday moved, and then you'd have 3:30 Saturday one, and then you have Alabama LSU?
It'd be easier for people who don't do what I do for a living,
right,
and have a studio that is their office with a multitude of TVs.
Right.
For the rest of the world, where they have one TV in their family room and they watch, I would have preferred they do that. For me, it doesn't matter. I'll have the 2 TVs going and I'll be watching.
Yeah, it should be a spectacular week of college football. Much better than last week. Last week,
like I said, that was. What did I tell everybody who watches this? Take advantage. You made your girl a football widow. Give her a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Get back in the chair for 8 o'clock on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I know Nebraska won on a Hail Mary, and Navy hung around against Notre Dame, but it still was not a great week.
They were nice games, and they were nice stories. But as you start to get later and later in the year, it's all about the BCS title game. So as much as college football likes to say, and the powers that be within the NCAA and everywhere else like to talk about the fact that, hey, listen, if we go to a playoff and it's going to kill our bowl system and it's going to take any of the relevance out of the regular season, much like the NCAA tournament does to the NCAA basketball regular season.
Right.
Well, when you only have 2 spots open, an awful lot of these other games become yes, so what? And people stop watching after week 7 or 8. So if you're not truly in the national title chase, people aren't watching it. That's why we're only talking about a small handful of games this week.
Now, I got something for you. I went ahead and looked at next week's schedule.
Cool.
Which is not great either. As a matter of fact, the next 2 weeks after this one, not great. I was trying to figure out next week where they would go for College Game Day. It's not a great slate of games. Let me go through them with you real quick. I mean, here's some of the bigger games next week. Alabama at Mississippi State. I mean, do you see them going down to Mississippi State? Is it possible?
Have they been anywhere where Alabama's played yet this year?
A&M.
Okay, so then they probably...
And they're going to be in Auburn.
Right, they're not going to go there.
Utah's at Oregon. They're not going back to Eugene for that game. I mean,
No,
they're just at Eugene.
No.
Ohio State's at Illinois. I mean, no way they're going to Champaign, are they? They're not going.
Have they gone to Columbus yet?
They went to Northwestern for Ohio State. I don't know if they've gone to Columbus.
Maybe that's a possibility.
Syracuse at Florida State, not
They've
happening.
already done Florida State, so...
Here's a possibility. Texas Tech at Baylor if Baylor wins this week, and that game.
That's where they're going if Baylor wins.
That's the game in Dallas. That's a neutral site game.
Yes, they'll go to the Jerry Jones Pleasure
If Baylor wins, I think that's where they're headed.
Exactly.
Now, I originally wrote this list. I said, what if Baylor loses? Where are they going? I also threw out, say Stanford wins. Stanford's at USC next week. Possible.
They'll go to you. They might go there.
Possible. I was looking at novelties, like, when they went to Fargo. Fresno and Northern Illinois. Fresno's off next week. Northern Illinois plays on Wednesday, so they're not going there.
Nope.
I'll tell you about a novelty. How about Duke? You know who Duke's got next week?
No.
Home for Miami. And I'll tell you why you might want to throw in a novelty. Let's just say, for instance, let's just say Stanford.
That's not as outlandish.
No,
it's a novelty.
A different place.
In a year with a bad schedule where you've gone to Fargo, North Dakota,
right?
And gone to the site where the best 1AA or football championship subdivision team in America plays. When you have a slate of games that doesn't really present an obvious stop, why not Duke, who for the first time in their history are bowl eligible in back-to-back years? It's a nice story.
And if they win this week, which I think they will against NC State, that's 5 in a row. They are alive for the ACC title game. If you're looking for a novelty, you don't know where to go.
Right. That's good. I think you really stumbled on something. That's some great detective work. I think that's one possibility. And a lot of it's going to depend on how this schedule shakes out. If Stanford wins, they're going to go to Los Angeles, and it's going to be Stanford USC. If Baylor wins, they're definitely going to Dallas.
So you think, say Baylor and Stanford both win, you say they would pick Baylor first.
Absolutely.
Because they're undefeated, they're going to be in the top 6.
Absolutely, no question.
And then second, you'd say Stanford USC if Stanford wins. I was trying to figure out, say Baylor lost and Stanford lost. That's
your novelty act might come in.
Because you can't...
I don't know where else they could possibly go.
You're not going to Florida.
Ohio State and Champaign, but if you've already been to Northwestern... If you were going to go to Ohio State, you're going to go when they're back in Columbus.
And Illinois is horrible. At least Duke's playing Miami, and Miami at this point is still still a good team.
It's a one-loss team that's ranked in the top 10.
You can't go Alabama, Mississippi State. You're going, you have Alabama.
You're going to go to Auburn for the Iron Bowl. There's no reason.
You're doing Alabama this week.
There's no reason to go to Starksville. So. And you're doing Alabama this week, like you said. They're not. You already answered your own question.
And Fresno is off, and Northern Illinois plays on Wednesday. I was looking for novelties.
Right, and the novelty will be at some point Fresno or Northern Illinois when they play on a Saturday.
No, absolutely.
If there's no other obvious situation.
I made my friend down in Durham happy. I said, you know what? It's not out of the realm of possibility that college
absolutely not
could be in Duke. They sometimes like throwing a novelty in there with you, like a Fargo or an Army-based game or something.
When something doesn't clearly present itself, and if Baylor loses and Stanford loses, nothing clearly presents itself.
No, absolutely.
Because if you're going to go follow Ohio State again, you're going to go when they're in Columbus. You're not going to go on the road a second time to follow Ohio State.
Absolutely. So there you go. You guys are all set with your picks. Now, I implore you guys, and Joe's going to say the same thing. Get to a TV set on Thursday night. I don't care where you have to go. With your home, a bar, wherever else.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to need 2.
Right.
So you may have to go out. Go to a sports establishment, a bar. Find a place that's got 2 TVs in close proximity so that you can have both of these games on at the same time. They're going to be they're going to be barn burners. Hopefully, it's a place that, while loud, will have the sound loud enough on one of these games that you can follow along. I think this is going to be one of the best slates of games on a Thursday night that I've ever seen. I think watching those 2 at the same time is going to be a whole lot of fun.
Absolutely. You never get 2 college football games on a Thursday of this magnitude. Maybe occasionally you'll get 1, and that's a maybe.
You don't even have 2 on a Saturday at the same time. Usually they stagger them out, and you're able to roll from 12 to 3:30 to 7:30 or 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
This is 2 on at the same time that are must-watch appointment view football games. And they staggered them enough that The ending of one will probably coincide with halftime of the other, and the ending of the second one will have the stage all to itself.
No, so guys, please, Thursday, watch Oklahoma at Baylor. Should be a tremendous environment in Waco for that game. And for sure, watch Oregon at Stanford on the farm. That is a tremendous game. To me, it's the best game of the weekend. And then on Saturday, if you're a college football fan, it doesn't get better than LSU at Alabama.
No question about it.
I mean, that's college
football. And it's
football.
8 o'clock. It's prime time. You got the whole day to spend with your significant other or the family because there's not a whole lot that presents itself on Saturday afternoon. You got Thursday night. Take Thursday night for yourself. Give up Saturday afternoon. Take Saturday night, prime time, get to a television.
Absolutely. So you guys, thanks for the support as always. Tomorrow, NFL picks. We're going to go through the whole NFL slate. Joe, tell them where they can find you as always.
Absolutely. You can find me. I'm host of the Spano and Black Attack. It here airs nationally 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network and SiriusXM Satellite Radio. Check the Sports Byline website at www.sportsbyline.com for affiliate listing and a station in your area. If you want to catch me on TV, WPIX Morning News, anytime the Jets or Giants are playing a Monday or Thursday night matchup, be on the lookout for me then. Segments air sometime between 6:40 and 6:55 a.m. Eastern Time on the WPIX Morning News.
There you go. You know where to find Joe. Thank you, Joe, for being here as always. Tomorrow, like I said, NFL picks. We'll touch on the NBA, touch on the NHL slate. So I'll talk to you guys tomorrow, Wednesday. You guys, thanks for the support. Enjoy the games tonight. Talk to you tomorrow, Wednesday. Take care.